Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. And this is kicking back off to Andrew Jackson's part 2, Good, Evil, and the Presidency. If you haven't seen part 1, I just got done filming it, so I don't know where you were, but I was here. But part 1, like the first 12, 13 minutes, I went over some pictures from my visit to the Hermitage. I already know a good amount about Jackson. I explained it before. This is another one of those videos that I'm trying to share with people who've always shared with me, the subscribers. I find Andrew Jackson fascinating. The presidency, not so much, but his life leading up to it. So I'm hoping you'll enjoy it just as much as all the things you've given to me that I found fascinating. So back to the video.
Most unhappy couples lived in loveless marriages rather than flout the law. But Andrew and Rachel were not the kind of people who let social convention stop them from following their hearts.
These two hapless people up until this point find each other, and the opportunity and the desire merge for a really extraordinary decision, which is for the two to elope to Natchez.
The two young lovers headed south along the Natchez Trace Trail. Their goal was the wild and woolly town of Natchez on the Mississippi River, which was governed by Spain.
It was Louisiana, I believe.
By running off with Andrew, Rachel was making it clear that she was never going back to her husband, no matter what the consequences.
For a woman to choose to leave her husband, especially one who came from Rachel Donaldson's background, was an extraordinarily courageous decision on her part, because in Rachel's case, she knew that she was essentially setting herself up to be condemned by the society that she lived in.
And
the shadow of this decision would haunt them through the rest of their days.
Mm-hmm. People loved to gossip. People loved to gossip back in those days, much like today. So, seeing her do this, oh, she was a bit of a naughty gal.
Daring elopement was worth it, for they made an ideal match.
Where others could not tame him, she could. There's one incident that occurred when they were floating down the Mississippi River, and there were some people that annoyed Jackson. Don't recall exactly what it is they did. And he took a rifle and he starts shooting at them. And right away they ran down into the cabin and told Rachel. She said, "Please tell Mr. Jackson I would like to see him."
They could have done anything. They could have said, "Hi." That's all it took.
She could handle him. She was the right person for him.
With Nashville still a frontier town with few churches and fewer courts, Rachel and Andrew were able to return home after 6 months and be accepted by most of the community as man and wife. But Rachel's husband was not so forgiving, and he took his case against her to the state legislature, where he won permission to sue for divorce on the grounds of adultery. In 1793, the courts granted Lewis the first divorce in the history of the state of Kentucky. Not long after, Rachel and Andrew were quietly married in Nashville. Rachel hoped that if she and Andrew were loving and faithful, the fact that she had been branded a scarlet woman would soon be forgotten. But her new husband was interested in politics, and her adultery would one day be a central issue in the race for President of the United States.
Fair or unfair? Mostly unfair.
For all his wildness, the young Andrew Jackson also had the determination, vision, and charisma of a born leader, And in 1796, the state of Tennessee sent him as its lone representative to Congress. But the learned statesman who filled the nation's capital didn't quite know what to make of the fiery frontiersman.
Jackson was so passionate when he came to Congress in the 1790s that Thomas Jefferson remembered that he would get on his feet and become overwhelmed with his emotions, literally choked with rage, could not get out a word, and red-faced had to sit down again.
If the Washington elite were unimpressed with the passionate Mr. Jackson, the feeling was mutual.
Congress was stifling for Jackson. It was a place where people met in committees and did backroom deals, and Jackson despised backroom deals. It was a place where people traded favors with one another in order to get what they wanted, and Jackson thought that was hideously corrupt.
After just over a year in Congress, Jackson resigned, declaring,
"I was born for the storm, and a calm does not suit me."
Raising racehorses now became his favorite pastime, and betting enormous sums on those horses in match races became his passion.
Andrew Jackson loved horses, violence, whiskey. He was also someone who, if you were his friend, you were his friend forever. If you were his enemy, God help you.
Yeah.
In 1805, Jackson won a huge sum of money when his opponent's horse came up lame. But a dispute over how the payoff was made led to an escalating series of insults between Jackson and a young Tennessean named Charles Dickinson.
Later, his friends insisted that Dickinson had said something about Rachel Jackson. And here's something else that Jackson is very sensitive about, because his whole marriage to Rachel had been under a cloud from the beginning. And anybody to raise that point in any direct or even indirect way would trigger a very violent response.
On May 30th, 1806, Charles Dickinson and Andrew Jackson met on a dueling ground. Dickinson was reputed to be the best shot in Tennessee, and when the signal was given to fire, he fired first. But to his shock, he apparently missed. Then Andrew Jackson took careful aim and mortally wounded Dickinson. Only then did Jackson's second notice that he was bleeding. Jackson had in fact been shot in the chest, with the bullet lodging next to his heart. When his shocked second asked how he could possibly have fired back accurately, Jackson replied,
"I should have hit him if he had shot me through the brain."
Jackson carried the bullet for the rest of his life. It was unmistakable evidence of how unsuited he was to the give and take of politics. But his future in a different arena could not have been brighter.
Sam Houston. The reputation of General Jackson will adorn the proudest, brightest pages in the nation's history. He wears the laurel wreath, which his own valor won.
In 1812, the United States declared war on Great Britain. Andrew Jackson had...
With Thomas Jefferson as president, he's the third president, there was issues with England and France because Napoleon was in power, war was going on. Jefferson put an embargo against all trade because American ships kept getting sieged. Sieged? That's not the word. Kept getting attacked and taken by both sides. And so he put an embargo in. James Madison comes in, and he's number 4. Madison doesn't like what's happening, declares war on England. When England decides to kind of cool everything down, they take a step back, and England pretty much came close to saying, we're sorry. This isn't what we want to have happen. But before they can put that thought out, they hear that, well, James Madison's already declared war on us. So they were like, oh, good, scrap that idea. Well, not too long after that, they defeat Napoleon at Waterloo and then turn all the attention to America. So that is setting up the War of 1812, where Jackson kind of starts to earn the name that will carry him. Okay. There you go.
Been yearning since he was 13 for another shot at the British. And having been voted commander of the Tennessee militia, his dream had now come true. To inspire fellow Tennesseans to join his army, he declared,
Who are we, and for what are we going to fight? Are we the titled slaves of George III, the military conscripts of Napoleon the Great, or the frozen peasants of the Russian Tsar? No, we are the free-born sons of America, the citizens of the only republic now existing in the world, and the only people on earth who possess rights, liberties, and property which they dare call their own.
Leading up to this, to him becoming getting into the War of 1812, he sent him and some men. He formed a group, and they went down into Alabama. Hi, Greg. Just north of Mobile, there was a fort. I don't remember the fort's name, but I believe, were they Creek? The tribe Creeks? Were they Creek natives? And I want to say, was it John Wethersfield? He was half white, half Native American. And he led this group to this fort. This fort was a military fort, and it was filled with families, women, children, and soldiers. I don't remember, I want to say 300 people, maybe. They attacked the fort. They killed all but 11. They wiped out women, children, soldiers. They did not care. They killed everyone. I bring this up because it goes back to the first video when I was saying things about Jackson where he had issues with the natives and things like that. It's things like that that people forget, and they focus on Jackson being a terrible person, you know, the things that he did to the natives and whatnot. But they always leave out the other things that happened, and you have to put all of it in perspective. You can't just make one side look clean because they lost. You got to put it all together, and you got to say this is what he was dealing with. And so that's, I bring that up. It's north of Mobile. I was going to go there and I didn't. There's not much going on, but they do have a recreation of the attack every year. It's I didn't see it, but it sounds pretty gnarly.
But the mission Jackson and his men were ultimately given was far from glamorous. Tramping and slogging through the forests and swamps of the southeast until they had found and defeated Creek Indian warriors who were allied with the British.
Well, Jackson is in an unenviable position. He is one of 4 armies assigned to punish the Creeks. He is poorly supplied. His troops are very poorly trained. They have very short enlistments, and it's cold and wet, and they want to return home. Things are not going well.
After months in the field, Jackson's supply lines broke down. Fearing starvation, some of his soldiers mutinied and began to walk home to Tennessee. But Andrew Jackson threatened to kill them if they took another step. It was not an idle threat, for on 2 other occasions, Jackson had men under his command executed.
I told you in the first episode, when he said he wanted to kill you, he meant it.
See in Jackson's Indian campaigns a ruthlessness that is frightful to behold. He seemed possessed almost with a determination to go on no matter what.
Finally, in March of 1814, Jackson cornered the main Creek force. It was camped on a peninsula called Horseshoe Bend because it was protected on 3 sides by the Tallapoosa River. With the 4th side protected by a mammoth breastwork of logs they had built, the Creeks were convinced that their position was impregnable. But then Cherokee warriors fighting with Jackson swam across the river to the Creek village and set it on fire. Jackson saw his chance and ordered his men to storm the barricade. After brutal hand-to-hand fighting, Jackson's forces took the barricade.
From that point on, after the barricade was breached, it's no longer a battle. It is a search and destroy mission. It is...
I don't know why this just hit me, but was it in Alabama, that fort I was talking about? I think it's called Fort Mims. M-I-M-S. Don't know why it just popped into my head.
a slaughter.
Of the 1,000 Creek warriors, not one surrendered. It was Andrew Jackson's first great triumph. But to his friend Sam Houston, who fought beside him, it was also a tragedy.
The sun was going down, and it set on the ruins of the Creek Nation. Where but a few hours before, 1,000 brave warriors had scowled on their assailants. There was nothing to be seen but volumes of dense smoke, rising heavily over the corpses of painted warriors, the burning ruins of their fortifications.
More Native Americans were killed in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend than on any other day in the history of the United States.
One of the American participants who went down to the river that night to fill his canteen said it very nicely. The Tallapoosa might very well be called a river of blood, because as the dead and dying made it to the river, the Tallapoosa was turned red.
Horseshoe Bend was one of the only victories in a war that was turning out to be a disaster for the United States.
The British had captured Washington, D.C. following the Battle of Bladensburg, which military historians have called the worst disgrace in American military history. when the American militia broke and ran, hardly firing a shot. The British then moved in, burned the White House and the Capitol. So the war had been going very badly.
With Britain threatening to further humiliate America by conquering New Orleans, the army was desperate to find a general who could get his men to stand and fight. The general finally chosen was incredibly tough on his men, and yet his men were fiercely loyal to him. A riddle explained by his nickname, Old Hickory.
Andrew Jackson became Old Hickory when he was coming back from the front down in Mississippi, and he decided that he would walk while the wounded rode. And so he walked all the way home. And his men loved him for it. It was an example of amazing spiritual leadership. And they started calling him Old Hickory because they thought he was as tough as a hickory stick.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. Another person that could have gotten his place in history was future 9th President William Henry Harrison, who fought in the War of 1812. He was a general, but he was fighting more up north, Indiana, Michigan, Canada, Ohio area. Then he resigned, and when he resigned, there was a kind of a power vacuum, and Andrew Jackson filled it. And maybe Andrew Jackson still takes over and becomes more of a known figure. Maybe he doesn't. William Henry Harrison had an advantage. Worked out for both. William Henry Harrison later ran on his battle at Tippecanoe, which is what killed the native Tecumseh, with the slogan Tippecanoe and Tyler too, Tyler being John Tyler, the vice president. So just, William Henry Harrison died 30 plus days into his office because of sickness, but still, both of them generals in this war, 7th president and the 9th president. So I'm going to end this here, and I did a quick check, and yes, it is Fort Mims. I'm just going to kind of read it. The conditions and events that led up to the Creek Indian War, which resulted in the Fort Mims massacre on August 30th, 1813, began the start of the War of 1812. Began before the start of the War of 1812. In the early 1800s, the loosely Confederate tribes of the Creek Nation numbered somewhere between 18,000 to 24,000 persons and primarily inhabited present-day Alabama and western Georgia. Their territory was generally bounded by the Tennessee River on the north, the Gulf of Mexico on the south, the Oconee River in Georgia on the east, and the Tabingabee River on the west, and comprised 300 square miles. In the years following the American Revolution, the United States, Great Britain, Spain, and France all sought alliances with the Creeks. They had attempted to diminish the other influence in the region. Hold on. Let's see. By early 1813, about 550 settlers and slaves from the surrounding area had crowded into the tiny stockade. A number of friendly Indians and half-breeds also sought protection within the fort. Before the massacre, the Creek Nation had generally peaceful relations with the white settlers. Oh, it doesn't really say. Oh, wait a minute. I tell you what, go to fortmims.org, and there are links here. You can look it up. Yeah, I'm trying to see the final results, but it's you know, go to fortmims.org and you can read all about it. It's 8:30. I've had to make up 2 weeks of videos in 3 days because I'm going to be gone next week. I'll be gone. So, I'll be still uploading, but I'll just won't be filming. So, I'm gonna end this here. Like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it. Andrew Jackson's a fascinating character to me. George Washington has another. Thomas Jefferson is interesting. I don't really care for him as much. Oh, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. Now that's a treat. Lincoln. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty. Ulysses S. Grant. But I'm not going to keep naming names. I'm just going to end this here. Again, like and subscribe. Again, thanks for watching. And have a good day. Have a good night.